The biggest addiction of all is suffering. You might think, well, I'm addicted to smoking, I'm addicted to sugar, I'm addicted to alcohol, whatever, sex, whatever your thing is, interpersonal drama. But at the core of all addictions, I am arguing today that the biggest addiction of all is suffering. And suffering is actually the only addiction. Think of it that way. If we weren't addicted to suffering, we wouldn't even have the need for other addictions, right? If we weren't aligned with the energy of suffering. Okay, so if we're addicted to suffering, we don't like suffering. Why would we be addicted to it? Here's what I think is the answer to that. When we are children and we are happy and carefree and emotionally resilient, and by that I mean just the way a little kid could be crying one minute and then laughing the next minute and see no contradiction. You know, if you go up to a 2-year-old and like, well, you're laughing right now, but 2 minutes ago you were crying. I don't get it. You know, they won't even get what you're talking about, obviously, because they're a 2-year-old. But even if they were older, if they were that emotionally resilient, they'd be like, why do I have to stay in the same emotion? Why do I have to be accountable for the emotion of 2 minutes ago? So here's the thing. You were born into bliss, and then your bliss was constantly assaulted, but for a while you didn't even notice. Because you were resilient. You were able to cry and purge the feeling out and then go back to happiness. And at one point, your world crashed down and you lost faith. You lost that resilience. You were traumatized past a certain point of suffering. And kind of like a Stockholm syndrome type thing, you allied your energy with suffering. You gave up hope that there could ever be the happiness that you had before. In fact, you sealed that happiness off because that happiness became the most dangerous place you could go. Now you might say, why would happiness be dangerous? Why would I not want to be happy? The reason you would not want to be happy is because when you lost that childlike innocence that you had, and I'm talking about whatever you lost before you were even 3 years old, okay? I'm not talking about later in childhood. I'm talking about that core wounding that happened when you lost paradise. What happened then is that paradise, that lost state, although you've been longing for it, we've all been longing for it ever since we lost it, to protect ourselves, we convinced ourselves that it wasn't even true, that it was silly, that it was immature to even yearn for happiness. One time, my late mother criticized me for kind of saying something like, I can't remember what it was, about future career stuff or whatever, and I had said something like, I don't care as long as I'm happy. To which she remarked to me and to my siblings that was really immature. That was really ridiculous. Wanting happiness, to some people who see themselves as very realistic, is the most immature, childish thing ever. And why is childish bad? That's another way we've walled off our happiness and locked ourselves into a world of suffering. Now, you might say, well, I'm not suffering. I have a great life. I'm happy. Good. Look at a 2-year-old playing. Look at a 2-year-old giggling. Are you that happy? Look at a 2-year-old crying and then laughing 5 minutes later. Are you that emotionally flexible? No, you're not. And so what we've all done is we've convinced ourselves that suffering, although we usually don't call it suffering, we just call it normal life. We convince ourselves that that is the norm. That everything else is unrealistic, utopian thinking. And it's this idea kind of like, no, there's always people dreaming of utopia, but it's always bullshit. And deep down inside of me, I always thought utopia is not bullshit. Utopia is the way it's supposed to be. Heaven on earth is supposed to be the norm. And the fact that we're addicted to suffering, the fact that we don't think heaven on earth is even a realistic idea, that's why we're screwed. Because we're not even imagining ourselves out of the predicament. We don't dare to. And the reason we don't dare to is because we don't want to lose paradise again. The worst suffering you have ever experienced is something you don't even really remember. And that is when you lost your connection to oneness. And it wasn't even a connection to oneness because you were oneness. You can only look at it now as a connection to oneness because you're separated from oneness, so intellectually you can only imagine connecting to it. You can't imagine being it. And that is what children are before they lose paradise. That's what you were before you got addicted to suffering. This first stage out of it is admitting to your addiction. I am addicted to suffering. I am addicted to suffering, and I refuse to even let myself believe that there's a reality outside of my suffering. So let's take that first step. Let's admit that we are addicted to suffering. And only then can we start untying the knots and releasing the illusion and reclaim the paradise that is our birthright. It is there waiting for you. It is your true self. It is the essence of your soul, oneness, the universe, whatever. And let me make one thing clear. Letting go of the addiction to suffering does not mean living a life completely devoid of pain. Pain is felt in paradise. Pain is why that 2-year-old can cry 1 minute, but the emotional flexibility is why that child can laugh the next minute. It's not about everything being pain-free. It's not about never having a so-called negative emotion. It's about having a wider range and not getting stuck in the negative emotion and not getting stuck in the avoidance of the negative emotion. The biggest addiction is suffering. The only addiction is suffering. Are you willing to begin the process of breaking the spell of this addiction called suffering? If so, maybe I can help you out. Check out my website, andysway.com, or send me an email to andysway@yahoo.com. Thanks for watching. And if you like and subscribe and comment, I'd be really happy. But I won't suffer if you don't. So thanks for watching. Bye.